Kapul Nagibatanga, everybody, good morning. I'm Tiani Adamson, and I'm a wildlife conservation biologist, science communicator, and podcast host. And first and foremost, and most importantly to me and my family, I'm a proud Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander woman descended from the Karaeg Nations, which is up in Wyburn or Thursday Island in Zendakez or the Torres Strait. I've also been a part of the wonderful team at Bush Heritage for the past couple of years as their Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander National Engagement Manager and the host of season 3 of Big Sky Country, which is a podcast where we talk about the link between climate change and biodiversity and how they come together. I'm really excited to be joining you today from Kaurna country here in Tandanyanya in Adelaide, South Australia. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians from where you're all joining in from today. So feel free to put in the chat where you're joining in from to acknowledge the first people of the place that you're on. We acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, and know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have cared for country for thousands of years and continue to do so. We also acknowledge that our rights to self-determination, working together to look after country has significant and long-lasting benefits across the whole Australian continent and landscape. So feel free to pop in and say hi. Use the chat function, whether you're aligning with something or excited about something that one of our wonderful presenters is talking about. You can also post questions anytime during the webinar, and we'll get to those during the Q&A session. For those of you who are new to Bush Heritage, we're a leading conservation not-for-profit, or you might know it instead of not-for-profit like a charity, and we protect ecosystems and wildlife in landscapes all around Australia. We purchase blocks of land and restore it and protect these natural landscapes and work in partnership with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people or traditional custodians and with farmers and other landholders to deliver positive biodiversity outcomes in priority landscapes. And priority landscapes means landscapes that have high biodiversity value or lots of different types of animals and species with their diversity and abundance. So rather than tell you more about what Bush Heritage is about, I'd like to show you with a brief video because we know that pictures and videos are much more interesting than me and my little head. So our wonderful Megan's going to pop one on here.
Bush Heritage Australia works to heal and protect the bush now and for future generations. All life, including ours, depends on the natural world, from the smallest ant to the tallest tree. In 1991, our founders raised the funds to purchase 2 forest blocks and prevent them from being sold and logged. A dedicated community was born, and so too was our mission to heal and protect the bush. Today, our impact stretches across Australia. Through our network of reserves and partnerships, we restore habitats, protect wildlife, and build resilience across landscapes. Our people, including reserve managers, expert scientists, volunteers and partners, are in the field every day, tackling our environment's most significant threats. We control invasive animal populations and weeds. We manage country for fire or flood. We are informed by the knowledge systems of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and Western science, ensuring our conservation work is respectful, collaborative, and right way. We work with farmers to deliver practical solutions for people and nature at scale, working in partnership with a sector whose footprint covers more than half of Australia. Nature is facing unprecedented challenges. Bush Heritage delivers solutions powered by science that we need now more than ever. Together, we can ensure healthy country is protected forever. Our future depends on nature, and nature depends on us.
I love that beautiful video, and I really want to shout out to the incredible team that we have at Bush Heritage. We have so many epic people across Australia working to protect country. So a big shout out to our team across the nation. We're so lucky to have you all on board, and I wish that we had the time to interview and chat with everybody, but we've got 3 wonderful people that will be sharing their stories today. So, in addition to our extensive conservation work, we also play a leading role at Bush Heritage in providing practical training and learning opportunities to inspire and support the next generation of emerging environmental science and conservation professionals. Our Seeding the Future program offers a number of pathways for emerging professionals who are considering or actively seeking a career in conservation. We support the recruitment of early career professionals to learn and hone in best practice skills in a supervised environment through tertiary student placements, paid internships, and research collaborations for honours, masters, and PhD students. The increasing awareness of environmental issues, coupled with the need for professionals to address them, is the driving demand for conservation scientists today. And we know that we're in a climate crisis with increasing impacts of natural disasters. The whole world is getting hotter. Australia is one of the leaders in extinction. So it's a really important time now more than ever for people to get involved in conservation and helping to be a part of the solution. Employment for environmental and conservation scientists in Australia is projected to experience strong growth of over 12% by 2030. We've motivated and we're motivated at Bush Heritage by the transition across Australia to net zero, sustainability demands, and rising environmental regulations, as well as 30% protection of land and seas by 2030. The multidisciplinary nature of environmental sciences also offers great career progression and lateral movement between industries and contributes to a long and fulfilling career with boundless opportunities for growth and change and challenge. Today, I'm really excited to see hundreds of people and students joining us online, and I know that our presenters are really eager to speak with you all. So that's enough from me. Let's kick off with our first presentation. So first up is wonderful Ned Garlick-Kelly, Bush Heritage Reserve Manager at our Reedy Creek Reserve in Queensland, and also a previous Seeding the Future intern. So we can call Ned an alumni, which is pretty exciting. Welcome, Ned. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Tiani. Can everyone see that on the screen? Or can a few people see that on the screen, hopefully? Right. Sorry, I'll just get set up. Might be a second. Awesome. So thanks heaps, Tiani, just for the summary of what Bush Heritage does. And that video is just awesome. Like such a beautiful example, as you say, of the diverse people working within Bush Heritage and the diverse places we protect. So as Tiani said, I'm Ned Garlick-Kelly. I'm the reserve manager here at the beautiful Reedy Creek Reserve in central Queensland. I'm going to spend about 10 to 15 minutes running you all through the journey that got me to this point. Just before jumping in, though, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm very much a visitor here on the lands of the Baili, Garang, Garang, and Tarrabalang Bunda peoples. And I pay respect to the traditional custodians of this region that have and continue to care for land, sea, and sky country. And making space for facilitating and strengthening First Nations connection to country and culture is a key part of the Bush Heritage ethos, and it makes me so proud to be part of that in a small way. Awesome. All right. So I'd like you to run you through a quick story of this stylish young fella on the right, growing up on Widjabul country in the rainforests of northern New South Wales. This kid climbed trees, ate dirt, picked his nose like it was going out of fashion. He was also lucky enough to have 2 parents who exposed him to the natural world at every turn. He was perennially interested in nature, spending time centimetres away from ants' nests and constantly with a wad of crushed leaves to his nose. And in this pre-smartphone era, you'd stay outside until it was dark, or your soccer ball went through the window again. So in many ways, with the childhood outdoors, it was easy enough for me to slip into what came next. But I'm aware this is a very privileged position, and I'd like to come back to this at the end of my presentation. So continuing on through an embarrassing high school phase of skinny jeans and what I thought was parkour, I leant heavily into the science-based subjects. This was partly due to great teachers and an affinity for Bunsen burners. I then went on to study a Bachelor of Forest Science and Management at Southern Cross University, where I was shown the massive and daunting choice of career paths I might follow. And frankly, it was overwhelming. And for a while, I had no idea how to start or what I actually wanted to do. So I just tried as many as I had time for. Overseas agroforestry projects, revegetation, bush regen, ecological consultancy. The biggest turning point came when I volunteered with New South Wales National Parks down in the beautiful Barrington Tops. And here I spent a month camping in the pouring rain and freezing cold, crawling through blackberry and surveying for threatened orchids. The connections I made during this volunteering is really what kickstarted my career. And this led to further paid work conducting threatened species surveys, pest animal surveys, running weed control contracts, and exposure to some great mentors. So when the opportunity came to apply for an internship in South Australia, I threw my hat in the ring, totally thinking I'd have absolutely no chance at the role. One thing led to another, though, and I found myself in a totally foreign landscape out at Bulkamata Reserve, which is a bush heritage property on Adnyamatya and Wulyakali country, roughly 90 k's west of Broken Hill. I stayed out there for 4 months, working as a land management intern under Bush Heritage's Seeding the Future program. I experienced stunning sunsets, numb arms from fencing, and what conservation looks like at a landscape scale. I met some amazing people doing some incredible work on country, and this cemented in my mind that I wanted to work in conservation. As a paid internship opportunity, the Seeding the Future program allowed me to essentially trial a job that I didn't yet have all the qualifications for, and the financial support meant I could stay out there far longer than if I was just volunteering. And don't get me wrong, volunteering is so important, really opens doors professionally. Organisations like Bush Heritage probably wouldn't survive without our awesome volunteers. But as a young person trying to build a career, you can only dedicate so much time before it starts to impact you financially. And to have that stability of guaranteed income while I was doing something I was loving and that was helping my career was just amazing. Applying for these roles in conservation can feel daunting. Reading these long position descriptions that may as well list the things they don't want as opposed to the things they do want. It sometimes feels like you'll be as grey-haired as I am before you even come close to reaching the expectations for a role. That's where volunteering and internships like the Seeding the Future program can make all the difference. They enable you to get practical skills in a safe learning environment. And then when the time comes for that job interview, you have real world scenarios to talk about. That's genuinely how I've ended up in my current role. When the time came to interview for the position, I felt massively underqualified. I was working in more ecology-focused office-based role at a desk and didn't think any practical skills were relevant enough. But then for each interview question, I was able to draw on experiences from my internship or from volunteering or working in other roles and show that I had the ability to learn new skills, build relationships, and problem solve. And that's more or less how I've ended up here. So I'm going to jump into my current role in a sec, but before I do, I just wanted to highlight something. So we often see the positive side of conservation, greenery, happy animals, and in case the video isn't working, these are swarms of butterflies flying around. But the reality of working in this field is more challenging and more rewarding. There are days when you feel like you don't achieve much or can't seem to get dry or there are too many problems. Sometimes the simple act of just getting out there, trying, learning, and connecting with people and nature is the most positive step you can take, even if it means getting soggy socks or covered in dust or bitten by mosquitoes. So for a quick bit of context, I'll jump into my current role. Reedy Creek Reserve, where I'm lucky enough to work as a reserve manager, is located in central Queensland, about a 6-hour drive north of Brisbane. This beautiful reserve sits right on the coast, sandwiched between the town of Agnes Water to the north and Deepwater National Park to the south. The reserve protects a range of habitat for a diversity of fauna and flora, including the barking owl, a giant burrowing cockroach endemic to the region, and a number of threatened ecological communities. We're a small reserve, about 470 hectares, but the barriers to effective conservation here are about as diverse as the landscape. So I can hear you thinking, what's a reserve manager? What do you do every day? It's about as different and as diverse as you can imagine. One day it might be controlling weeds and filling up the buggy with cactus. The next it's popping on some waders to survey for fish, followed by supervising a group of volunteers who are keen on pulling out every single weed imaginable and put me to shame with their work ethic. Every day looks different, but at Reedy Creek, our key focuses are weed control, feral animal control, so mostly foxes and pigs, community engagement, computer work on reporting and budgets, conducting ecological surveys, maintaining infrastructure, and whatever else happens to come across our doorstep, including one of my favourite aspects of the job is fire management. So fire is an amazing tool if it's respected and absolutely devastating if we aren't prepared. And fire has been used as a tool to care for country, law and culture by traditional custodian groups across the continent for countless generations. At Reedy Creek, we use fire to reduce bushfire risk and promote a healthy, diverse ecosystem. Many of the plants and animals at Reedy Creek have evolved an intertwined relationship with fire, and it has become a pretty critical part of the ecosystem. We apply fire when conditions are mild and the fire is cool and slow and patchy. Burning in this way allows animals time to move out of the fire's path, avoids damaging the seed bank for the native plants, and stimulates new growth by making nutrients more available. Fire management isn't just dropping a match and walking away, it's planning, understanding weather patterns and vegetation types. It's making space for the deep understanding that traditional custodians have of fire within that landscape. It's leaf blowers and helmets and dorky yellow outfits. And if you're lucky, sometimes it's helicopter rides. So this is up at the beautiful Yorker Reserve on the Atherton Tablelands in northern Queensland. And this was just within the first 2 or 3 months of the job. We were up here for fire training and was lucky enough to get the opportunity to go up and see the results of a prescribed aerial burn. So really cool to see, just an example of the diversity of stuff you might get to see in the role. So there you go. You know my life story a little bit. There's a bit more to know, but not too exciting. And what I'm currently doing day to day. But how or why does this apply to you? Well, if you've ever considered a career in environmental science, or you're just interested in nature and helping protect our incredible planet, or even if you're just in school and watching this to avoid studying, then let me tell you something I've learned in my short years. I don't have much wisdom, but hopefully this is a tiny piece. Just do the thing. It's not always easy. It's not always fun. And it often doesn't go the way you think it will. But you don't have to know what you like until you try it. You don't have to do it all or know it all or have all the shiny qualifications. What counts is the act of trying, getting out, and listening with patience to anyone who's happy to share their knowledge of the land. Amongst all the noise and finger pointing and negative news are people doing the work to protect what they care about. Because at the end of the day, none of us know what conservation will look like in 10 years, let alone 100. But the more open-minded and compassionate people we have out on country, closer we might get to understanding each other and the planet we care about. And that's me. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ned. And if we were in a room where we were IRL, if we were in real life, there'd be a bunch of clapping sounds in the background for Ned now. So feel free to have a little clap in your, I know you're on mute and we can't hear you, but feel free to say thanks to Ned in the chat. That was such an awesome presentation. I loved the Instagram versus reality pictures and also the way that you grounded us in the humility of being a young person who loved being outside. And I think it's something that we often forget. And I remember when I was in high school seeing professionals in the field and being really intimidated. I guess we wear, collared shirts and certain outfits, or thinking that people who are in a profession maybe are more serious. But especially in the conservation sector, we're all just a bunch of very generally a little bit strange nerds who like bugs and frogs and being outside and hiking and camping and all that sort of thing. So a good thing to remember, and I really liked the way that you grounded it in that. And also having a crack, having a try, and working it out later. I know every single opportunity that I've applied for, I've thought that I wouldn't be eligible to get the role, and I have got the role anyway. So that's definitely my advice to pass that on. So thanks, Ned. That was so awesome. You absolutely rock, and we're lucky to have you. I'm going to pass on to another incredible human, Issy Overhill, who's going to pop up in a second. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, to put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. And Issy has just completed her Seeding the Future internship with Bush Heritage last month, and she's an awesome presenter. I'm really excited to throw to her, and she also really likes scats and poo, so that's pretty cool. I'm excited to throw to Issy.
Yes, I have done a little bit of work with scat counting, and it's actually really enjoyable. But yeah, great way to start off. So I'm going to take you through my path in conservation so far, just so you guys can see another perspective of what that can look like, and how to get into the industry as well. I also wanted to acknowledge the traditional custodians whose lands I'm presenting on today, which is the Bunurong people. As well as those whose lands I've worked on, so the Tanarong and Dja-Dja-Wurrung people. Like Ned, I've been really lucky in that my parents are really outdoorsy, and fueled my love of nature with my sister as well. So we did lots of camping trips and exploring rock pools. I got really into binoculars for a while as well. And when I was little, I decided that I was going to be an explorer. Obviously not a super realistic career path, but that reformed into working into conservation, which I think was also influenced by wanting to make a bit of a difference, especially given the state of the planet right now. In school, I really loved literature and art and biology, and I absolutely despised maths. In BC, I did drag myself through methods, which was a very painful experience for me. But it was a prerequisite for a Bachelor of Science at some universities. And it taught me a lot about persistence. And try again. But I think that's been really useful in hindsight. At the time, I really hated it. I then did my uni at Monash, which didn't even have maths as a prerequisite, or maths methods anyway. But they did have a great opportunity for different field trips, and also a lot of opportunities for study abroad, which is something that I was really interested in. So I did my Bachelor of Science, majoring in zoology, with minors in both Indigenous cultures and histories, and then also ecology and conservation biology. I think if you're just starting uni or you're just about to, it is worth noting that you don't have to decide your major straight away. And I used my first semester to work out what it is I wanted to do based on the units that I liked, and talking to different professors about careers in their fields as well. During my undergrad, I found it really difficult to balance full-time work and uni, whilst also fitting in volunteering. So I ended up saving and deciding to do a study abroad in Malaysia, which I feel at Monash is perfect because they have a campus there, so all your units will transfer really easily. A lot of unis also offer different scholarships and grants, especially for STEM students and women in STEM as well. I would definitely recommend having a look into those even before you're at uni or when you're there as well, because it's amazing how many things go unnoticed, and it really helped me once I had a look into those when I started studying abroad. Because I wasn't working while I was in Malaysia, I had plenty of opportunities for volunteering. So I signed up for pretty much everything I could think of, and I ended up working at a dog shelter and the National Zoo, and then I also worked for the Gibbon Conservation Society, and these were all pretty amazing experiences. that gave me insights into the different jobs that I could do and also different parts of those jobs. I also did a lot of camera trap volunteering through this website called Zooniverse. There's definitely other ones like it out there, but Zooniverse specifically is free, and also I found it very easily accessible, it's helped me a lot in my future roles and also just look good on the resume. If you're in Melbourne or Victoria, it's worth registering yourself on the Deakin Facebook page for ecology. The professors and students put their volunteer call-outs there, and it's a great way to meet mentors and other people in the industry, as well as building that volunteer work base for yourself. And then also any friends of the organisations, you can pretty much tack on most big animals and plant species there, and there's usually a group that you can work for. And then state volunteer groups as well for like state parks. And obviously Bush Heritage has a really great volunteering program as well. After my undergrad, I did my honours year with Rowan Clark's lab, and that was at Monash in collaboration with Bush Heritage. That was probably the most difficult year of my academic life, but it was also absolutely my favourite. It was so exciting and rewarding, and I had a lot of autonomy in this role. So I was working in Dja Dja Wurrung country in some Victorian reserves to compare drone thermal monitoring to scat counting for estimating kangaroo populations. So on the far right panel, those little yellow dots are the thermal signatures of kangaroos. And this was, like a really exciting time for me. Honours really highlighted parts of the work that I enjoyed and where I wanted to go, and also bits that I wanted to avoid and didn't like as much. I was in a group of about 20 other honours students in my cohort, which was super fun. We all became really good friends. And a lot of those students applied for jobs throughout their honours position, which set them up really well for work after honours. But I found that quite overwhelming and a little bit difficult to multitask. So I ended up opting to travel after my honours year and do some volunteering abroad. But at the last minute, I was sent this Bush Heritage internship, and it looked pretty amazing, so I had to apply. And then luckily for me, I got the position. The internship was focused at Roundhouse Reserve, which is just outside of Melbourne in Victoria. It's a pretty small reserve. And that was through the Seeding the Future program, and focusing on conducting the first population assessment for deer at this reserve. So this had a whole new level of autonomy. It was really exciting to meet so many new people in the industry, and a bit overwhelming at the beginning as well, but it was actually so much fun to get involved with. So I got to design and conduct the entire project myself. I did some scat counting again. I did camera trap work, established some exclosure plots to assess impact of browsers, and then also some baseline vegetation surveys. And that came with leading and training a team of volunteers through multi-day field trips, liaising with a lot of different stakeholders and adapting to different budgets and weather impacts and that sort of thing. But I also had the opportunity, aside from my field work, to speak at plenty of different presenting events, and attend a lot of different workshops, and also Bush Heritage hosted events, and meet an incredible amount of people who have been invaluable to me in learning the different places that you can go with conservation, and also helping me after the internship in terms of job opportunities and that sort of thing. You should absolutely say yes to every opportunity you get if you're doing an internship. I think it's important to realise that it is such a privilege and not one that everyone gets to experience. And because, like Ned mentioned, they are paid positions, you really can fully commit to the role that you're in and say yes to any other extra events that might come up along the way. So if you do have the opportunity, I would definitely recommend getting involved with Bush Heritage in that way as well. currently, I'm looking for my next role in conservation. So this includes entry roles, PhD positions that interest me, and also other internships. And it is a bit of an untethered and scary position to be in, similar to finishing high school or starting uni or finishing uni. But I think now, even though it is still scary, I have been able to acknowledge how lucky I am to be able to make that choice for myself. So my last tip for you guys would be that in the position that you're in now, try and embrace the fact that you have the luxury of choice, and also the luxury of time to make all the mistakes that you need to make while you're working out what you really want to do in industry. And that's me.
Thanks, Izzy. That was fabulous. What an incredible human you are. And I feel like the amount of experience you've had in the field and the pictures that you've shown, that you must be at least 80 years old, but I know that you're not. You've had such an amazing career already, getting so much experience all around different parts of ecology and wildlife conservation biology. And I think you're an amazing example of female leadership, putting yourself forward and trying new things. And we've been so lucky to have you at Bush Heritage for an internship. So again, if we were in real life, there would be clapping sounds. So we'll just, hopefully this is loud enough for you. But definitely get behind Izzy in the chat there. And thanks so much for your words of wisdom to everyone online as well. We have, and also sorry about throwing you under the bus with the scat comment. I think when you're in the world of ecology and wildlife conservation, you know that there's a lot of different science data that comes from scats, and we're all scat people. We're all into animal poo. So if you get one thing out of today, let it be to inspect the poo that you find in the environment more closely. That's my main piece of advice. Just kidding. Last but not least, I'm going to pass over to our wonderful Andy Howe, who is an incredible ecologist that we're lucky to work with. You might have seen him modelling for OPSM as you walk through a shopping centre or in different ecology magazines. He used to work for another conservation, was it ALC or AWC that you worked for before? And we're now lucky enough to have brought him over to Bush Heritage, which we're really grateful for. He's currently focusing on work at our Pullen Reserve, and I'll pass over to you, Andy. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tiani. Hopefully you can see my screen coming up here. I'm Andy. I'm the reserve ecologist at Pullen. And like Izzy and Ned, I'll be running through, I guess, my take on how I've come to working in conservation. And I have a little bit of a different angle from what Ned and Izzy have portrayed so far. So hopefully speak to a few different people in the audience there. But firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of my Wali country, which is where Pullen is located, and also the Awabakal people of where I'm currently residing. Where did I develop my passion for conservation? So unlike Izzy and Ned, I unfortunately didn't have that outdoorsy family from an early beginning and growing up. That wasn't really what our family did. But I just had this inbuilt passion and desire about animals, wildlife, conservation. And I guess that stemmed from a few things that you see on the screen here, and what I class as my original influences pre-social media. Steve Irwin, everyone knows Steve Irwin, really inspirational for me growing up. And also Malcolm Douglas. And if you don't know who Malcolm Douglas is, I'd highly recommend jumping on YouTube and watching his docos. And, he was instrumental and one of the pioneers of I guess, early documentary making and shining a light on conservation and working with traditional owners and how traditional owners work with the land and conserve the land through sustainability and right way science. So he has some incredible documentaries, and it was far ahead of his time for sharing that with the Australian public. So highly recommend going and watching his stuff. Yowies, I was a young boy when Yowies first came out, and I think I was the only person who wanted the little figurine of the animal and the little snippet of information about threatened species more than the chocolate. So used to beg mum and dad for those, and these things called wildlife fact files. So nowadays you can just Google anything, but back in my day when I was growing up, you used to have to snip a little coupon out of the Saturday paper and exchange it for a little brochure on whatever threatened species it was that week. And I used to love reading these things and copying them out in my own words. So that was my upbringing. But why did I choose a career in conservation? I knew I had to work outdoors, and I wanted something adventurous. Excuse me. And I knew, I had this passion for wildlife and for conservation, and that's kind of what led me to pursuing a career in that. I didn't really get that early exposure through family, through camping and having parents that were into outdoors. So I kind of didn't really start enacting on these things until I went to university and when I was like a late teenager. I think the first time I actually went camping was when I was 18. So bit of a late riser for that one, but everything that I tried, I loved, and I just knew I wanted to do more of it. I also knew I wanted to contribute my tiny little piece to making the world a better place. And a big one for me is that I wanted to act and speak for environments and wildlife that can't act and speak for themselves. So often it's people like us who are passionate about conservation and wildlife that they rely on us to have a voice for them. So I knew that that's a career in conservation would fulfill that kind of little value that I had. And, as the photo shows on the right there, that is Pullen. That's my office. And I consider myself extremely lucky. So, we get to travel a fair bit and experience a lot of different landscapes and do some really adventurous stuff. And it's just part of the job. So I think we're extremely lucky. In terms of my career path, I guess I finished high school, knew I wanted to go to uni and study science and wildlife science. So I went to UQ and out of the Gatton campus there, studied my degree and then graduated and then kind of didn't really know where to go. I initially went to uni wanting to be a park ranger and kind of swiveled after my first 12 months. And I guess that's the good thing about university, like Izzy pointed out, is that you don't have to make a hard concrete decision in your first year or even your second year or even at the end of your degree. There's so many different avenues to get to wherever you need to go. And I guess I was swapping and changing through university as I was doing a lot of volunteering and figuring out what career paths and industries were out there. I guess I didn't really have a clue when I went to university. I wanted to be a park ranger and I didn't know there was all these other industries and positions out there. So that was really opened in my eyes through volunteering. And one of the things that I connected with the most was people who shared the same values with me, and I kind of treated them as a bit of a mentor. So I really listened to what they had to say and seeked out these people for advice. I've put these 4 photos up here, and these are all volunteer positions that I put my hand up and said yes to. But I've used these 4 examples specifically because I didn't know it at the time. I was just getting out there and experiencing new projects and exploring new places. But each one of these volunteering opportunities led to employment later in my career. So it just shows that, lots of different experience and exposure can lead to employment through lots of different avenues with a lot of different industries. So with my career path, I graduated university and I started working at Australia Zoo up on the Sunshine Coast. I worked for Wildlife Rescue Unit, so lots of handling of wildlife. I didn't work in the zoo with captive wildlife. It was all wild animals. So that was a really big eye-opener and a really great experience. I've worked on a lot of large infrastructure, construction projects. I've worked in the mining industry. So lots of different industry and there's good and bad points to a lot of those things. Just prior to Bush Heritage, I worked for nearly 10 years at the Australian Wildlife Conservancy, which is another not-for-profit conservation organisation, and got to work on some really exciting and really, really meaningful projects there as well. And then I've been with Bush Heritage now for just over 12 months and loving it, and getting to be involved with lots and lots of different projects. So there's a little bit of, I've worked across private, I've worked private conservation, industry, mining. So you can jump around and still end up working in conservation and really achieving your goals. I think since I've jumped across into working in private conservation with Bush Heritage and AWC, I know that's where my passion really lies, and I know that every day that I turn up to work, my little passion cup gets filled every single day. There's hard days, there's good days. There's always things with every job, there's things that you don't necessarily want to do, but it's part of the job. But I know that everything that I do in this job fills that cup for me. So I consider myself extremely grateful for that. I get to share all these experiences with like-minded people who share the same values that I do. It's really cool that I remind myself that I'm out camping in the bush and achieving some really cool outcomes for a threatened species or for an entire ecosystem through land management or some survey work and some data that we're pulling out of it. And everybody feels the same way about we're actually making that tiny change for the better, and that's really rewarding, and it can be really, really fun most of the time. But I mean, we can see, part of the job of what I get to do as an ecologist, we do get to fly around in helicopters. We do get to work on rare and threatened species that aren't accessible to the everyday public. We do get to access these incredible areas that are essentially untouched, except for thousands and thousands of years of Aboriginal occupation, and we are lucky to be able to get access to these sites and learn about how significant these sites are through traditional knowledge. As part of my job, it is a reality that sometimes you will detect a new species or find a new species, describe a new species, find a range extension for a species. These are all very, very exciting things that occur with the job. But in saying that, at the same time, I think a lot of us suffer from this eco-anxiety that's happening. So there can be at points some really tough times mentally to deal with and adapt to. And I think a good graphic that I found is, I know me and a lot of my colleagues and friends relate to this, is, we're out bushwalking and maybe to the everyday people, they're like, wow, all the pretty flowers. And then there's all us people in the background in our heads thinking, yes, they're pretty, but they're all weeds and they shouldn't be there. So that's just a very basic example of eco-anxiety, but it is part of the job and it is something that we do have to deal with. And for a little bit of context, with Pullen, where I currently work, it was established 10 years ago this year. It's quite a large property, 56,000 hectares. It's in central West Queensland. It's on the land of the Maiwali people, who are the traditional custodians. And it's a really significant property in that it's Queensland's first special wildlife reserve, which means it has the same legal protection status of a national park. It's also home to the night parrot, where the night parrot was rediscovered after it was thought to be extinct for close to 100 years. And there's also a lot of other threatened species and really rare kind of arid zone species out there, like grey falcon, koaris, dusky hopping mice, and it has these really extensive intact spinifex grasslands and rocky outcrops that are really significant for those threatened species. So what do I do with my current role as the ecologist out there? A bit of everything, really. I do all the ecological surveys and research. I've just actually got back from Pullen yesterday. We've just installed a whole heap of pitfall traps and we'll be running our first pitfalling survey there in a couple of weeks. So it's really exciting to, when you get to go and survey an area that hasn't been surveyed for a long time or ever. it was really good having Auntie Judith, who's a Maiwali traditional custodian, out on site to help us do some cultural clearances and welcome us to country last week. So that's really significant in embracing the right way science and a two-way learning street between traditional knowledge and Western science. So it was really great to learn what significant species are important to Maiwali. We do lots of bird surveys, lots of spotlighting surveys. Here we go, scat analysis. It always comes back to poo and ecologist at some point, but that's really exciting research going on with some barn owl pellets on site to see if we can pick up certain threatened species and a different survey technique. What I also get to do is train a lot of volunteers and staff. Last week we had 4 volunteers out on site. Next week I've got 5 volunteers coming out. So a really good opportunity to get a high number of people out there and getting exposure and learning new skills and upskilling as well. We embrace the right way science technique, the collaboration with traditional owners, and in this case, the Maiwali people. I know I definitely got a lot out of last week working with Judith and her sharing her knowledge with us and seeing how significant species are to them. The night parrot is a totem species for Maiwali, so it's critical that we work together collaboratively to have the best outcome for the night parrot. And we also supervise external researchers. So at the moment, we have a Plains Wanderer PhD student working on Pullen. They're a critically endangered species that are found through that arid part of south central Queensland, and a lot of unknowns about that bird in that particular area. So some really exciting external researchers also working on country. But one of the big parts of my role is working on the night parrot recovery project at Pullen. As I mentioned, basically night parrot was thought to be extinct for 100 years until its rediscovery in 2013 at Pullen. So Pullen is the key long-term monitoring site for the species across Australia. So we do ongoing monitoring there. We do threat control, working with reserve managers on things, and their key threat, as with a lot of Australian species out there, is feral cats. And we have a long-term acoustic monitoring program on site, and we're looking to expand that and cover more areas of unsurveyed habitat, which is really exciting opportunity for us to potentially find some undiscovered populations or some new birds. And we're coming up with new technologies to help us better understand what's happening with that. So using AI, call ID, call recognizers and things like that. So using new technology and old knowledge from traditional custodians and merging them together. We have a really big responsibility to manage the night parrot and increase the numbers of birds. We're at critically low numbers at the moment. The species was just uplisted to critically endangered last year based off the newest amount of research. So we're doing all that we can to try and increase the number of birds. And then we want that conservation status to come down back to endangered or vulnerable would be the goal. But my advice for you guys as early career conservationists, or if you're looking to get into conservation, I mimic what Ned and Issy have said, and there's no straight line to your dream job. You can basically go any direction in which you like. Me personally, I've done my uni degree. I'm not an academic. I didn't go and do honours. I haven't done a PhD. I prefer to be more practical in the field. But also through that, I've had the opportunity to author, research papers based on my work, working in conservation and managing threatened species programs. So there is that academic side that has come in later. I've kind of done it around back at the front. But it's a good learning opportunity for me to pick up those skills to publish papers. I highly recommend and mimic what the other guys have said in terms of if there's an opportunity there, put your hand up and just give it a crack, because that's what I've been able to do, and it has opened up so many doors for me just in through connections with particular people, getting to see and experience different parts of the country, and working with some threatened species and with traditional owners on country that just the everyday people might not get access to. So as I mentioned before, I've got a few mentors throughout my career, and actually one of my original mentors was one of the volunteers that came out with me last week to Pullen. We've now known each other for almost 25 years, and we still try and work on each other's projects just because we obviously look up to each other and respect each other. So I think, yeah, success is not a straight line, that's for sure. There is no right way, there's no wrong way. But just put your hand up and say yes is my advice. But thank you, that's me.
Thanks so much, Andy. Another epic presentation. And again, clapping sounds all around, I'm sure, from all over Australia, from all the wonderful, wonderful people who are joining us today, and love your reflections about success not being a straight line. And again, your career looks like you're 80 years old, like Issy and Ned as well. So it's amazing, you know, when you are motivated and excited by something, how much you can fit in and how much diversity of experience you can get. So another person that we're very, very lucky to have at Bush Heritage. There's someone in the chat who's really excited about how many night parrots you've seen. If you're able to either pop that in the chat, or I can add it onto a question later, but I'm not sure if that's a number that you have off the top of your head or not. So we're going to do a speed round of questions. So we've got our wonderful 3 speakers, Issy, Ned, and Andy, and we're going to keep the questions as short as we can so we can get to as many as we possibly can. So to start off, Issy, are the deer at the roundhouse native to that area?
No, so deer are introduced to Australia, which is why I was doing population assessment, because they are pretty destructive. There was fallow deer and sand deer at that reserve, and there are also like Howe deer and roe deer.
Thanks, Issy. One for Ned. Ned, what is the role of an ecologist compared to a conservationist? Is there a difference? Do you need different qualifications?
Yeah, good question. I saw that Chrissy's answered that in the chat a little bit as well. So if I'm missing any detail, everyone have a look at that answer. An ecologist generally is going to be a bit more research focused, whereas a conservation is just that sort of broad term, really. It could be, you know, really practical land management. It could be engaging with traditional custodians. It could be like a really kind of diverse spread. It could be media and comms, like anything. You can be working as a conservationist within that sector, whereas an ecologist is more that sort of specific research focused or monitoring focused role.
Awesome. Thanks, Ned. One for Andy. If a person's studying environmental science, is there a role for someone who's able to work with both plants and animals, or are they separate?
No, definitely. Actually, more recently, working with plants is a really positive skill to have in it, and it's almost a bit of a dying art. Definitely someone with focusing on that degree can merge and divert off in any direction, but having skills across both fields is an amazing ability because there's enough to learn just in one or the other. But particularly focusing on flora is something that we're often needing additional people with that skill set because it's a bit of a dying art. So yeah, definitely go for both.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. I'll throw this one to Issy. What's your advice regarding volunteering in other countries? How do you suggest these opportunities are found, and how do you manage the finances and costs associated with travel? I mean, all 3 of you could answer that one, but we'll keep a short answer so we can get through a few more.
I think if you're going through uni, like looking at scholarships and grants is definitely the way to go because that really helped me. Generally, I would honestly just look up all their conservation platforms. So start like really big and work your way down. So starting with like national, state parks, for example, for Australia, but obviously internationally, or national zoos, national conservation centres. And then working your way down, a lot of those have associations with other little charities and volunteer groups. Financially, it's just always going to be a bit of a hit, and I think you just have to try and prioritize that for yourself and put your efforts that way. But yes, I would definitely recommend even just talking to professors or teachers about how their scholarships and grants are set up at different organisations, because they have so many opportunities that people just don't know about.
Thanks, Izzy. This one I'm going to throw. Andy or Ned, you're both welcome to answer this one. Is it vital to study at uni for conservation or ecology careers, or can TAFE certificates, real world experience and networking be enough? And then on the back of that, do you recommend doing honours or masters?
Well, I can give my 2 cents worth. No, you don't. You definitely don't have to go to university to have a career in conservation. It's definitely helpful. A lot of the ecology roles do kind of require a degree as a minimum. A lot of the land management roles, I think there's a base level of qualification, but you can definitely do a lot of that through TAFE because it's more practical based skill set. So you definitely don't have to go to university. And sorry, I forgot the last part of the question there, Tiani.
If postgrad is worth doing, honours, masters, and I'll add in a PhD as well, because that's actually a separate question if you need to do postgrad.
Yep. I mean, that is totally the decision of up to the individual. Depends what you want to achieve, depends where you want to go. As I mentioned, I did my degree, I didn't do honours and I didn't do PhD, and I'm able to be where I'm sitting today. So I'm living proof that no, you don't have to. A lot of people do, and they really enjoy it. But like I said, I'm not a hardcore academic, so that's not my true skill set. I like that practical side of ecology work. So it's totally up to the individual and where they want to go and what they want to achieve.
Thanks, Andy. Did you want to add anything to that, Ned?
No, he's pretty comprehensive on that one. Nice, Andy. No, I think just I would echo that you don't have to go to university, particularly these more practical based roles, conservation in, what is it, Certificate 3 in land management, which is something I've done as well to try and gain that more practical side of things, can be really, really useful and as applicable to the roles. Just follow your passion. I think depends what you're interested in.
Awesome. Thanks, Ned. Yeah, for myself personally, to add in my 2 cents, I did a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife Conservation Biology, and before that, I can see there's a question about if there's an overlap of veterinary medicine and conservation roles as well. So I started studying veterinary bioscience. I did that for 3 years, and then I swapped into conservation. So I know a lot of people who are veterinarians who work in the conservation sector, either in research or they might be out on reserve doing vet work. There's also lots of ecologists and environmental scientists who assist vets to do veterinary work. I really valued being able to have a bit of both, but went into more wildlife-based stuff. So hopefully that helps answer that question. I thought I'll pop my 2 cents in with that background. And now being a manager at Bush Heritage, I don't have a postgraduate degree myself either, but it's the networks and the volunteering that I've lent on to be able to get into the position that I'm in now, which I feel extremely lucky for. Andy, I'm going to throw back to you about these night parrots. How many night parrots do you think are at Pullen?
The latest research that we have for Pullen is we're about 18 to 20 individuals. That's adult birds. There's probably plus a handful of juveniles and immature birds within that. But that's an increase on what we were seeing 10 years ago when Bush Heritage first purchased the property to conserve the bird. So they are on an upward trajectory, albeit slow, but it is on the right kind of angle up. In terms of seeing things like night parrots, there's a reason they went kind of undiscovered for almost 100 years. They're extremely cryptic. They live in really remote places. They're nocturnal and they live in the spinifex. So to see one in the flesh is extremely, extremely difficult. Yes, I am lucky enough to say that I have seen a bird with my own eyes, but 99 times out of 100, you hear them calling on sunset. So that's the key time if you want to know if there's night parrots around.
How special. What an awesome experience. There's some questions about the balance between remote work and traveling for remote work, and I want to give that some time, but I also really want to make sure that we cover talking about accessibility in the field. Someone's spoken about what roles are accessible to people who have disabilities, and so really keen to get the insights on that, I guess, for yourself, Andy and Ned, who have been working remote, Issy as well, you've been traveling for work. And then if you can add a piece around the accessibility of things that people can access depending on what their accessibility requirements might be. Did anyone want to start off there? If you raise your hand, you can take yourself off mute.
I can
Thanks, Issy.
jump in. I think someone has actually already replied as well, but I definitely think personally, if you really have a passion for something, then there's always ways around it, and specifically conservation roles, where everyone is so concerned about working for the environment and protecting it. There's so many different ways that you can get involved and different ways to help out. And I know, for example, just with Bush Heritage volunteers, a lot of them are quite elderly, and they still get out there every time. So I think, especially because a lot of fieldwork is seasonal, if you can push through just for a little while in terms of a role, and then recover later on, but also getting out volunteering and seeing what things are accessible for you, and then talking to the people there about how you could get further along in that is definitely worth doing.
Thanks, Issy. Did you want to add to that, Andy?
I think I was just going to add that in my current situation and in some previous roles, yes, there is a lot of remote work. I particularly enjoy that part about my job. So I get the benefits of both worlds. I live coastal and I travel remote for field work. I like that juggle of how that works out. But in terms of accessibility, if I've worked with a lot of volunteers, interns, staff members who have maybe physical disabilities, or they just find their niche in terms of what they're able to do and what they're comfortable in doing, and they mold the role around what they're able to achieve that way. So definitely don't think that anything like that would restrain you from working in conservation, because there is always a role for everybody.
Thanks, Andy. Really well said. And I think the conservation sector is a place that is really special for many reasons. There's a lot of really generous people who care for country and care about doing something that's wider than their own physical human life, that they want to contribute to something bigger than themselves. Like Andy said in his presentation, being a voice for species and animals that can't speak for themselves in a language that we can understand anyway. Maybe if we could interpret a bird call better, we might hear what they're actually being able to say. But we also have an amazing diversity of a really high queer workforce, lots of neurodivergent staff, that includes myself, and there's lots of arrangements for people who have different accessibility needs, or ADHD or autism. We have a really, really neurodiverse sector in conservation. So that's really cool as well. And yeah, as Andy and Issy both said, accessibility requirements are always able to be chatted about, and please never let that become a barrier for what you apply yourself for in life. I would definitely apply, and then get those accessibility requirements around yourself. Don't not apply because you're not sure. Apply anyway, and then make the place become accessible for you, because that's what a workplace's or an organization's job is to support you with your needs. You're perfectly whole exactly as you are, no matter where you sit in the equity and diversity space. And it's an organization's job to help support you, to wrap you around with support for that, especially now. So the last one, and I know that we've gone a little bit over time, but all your questions are so fantastic, and I really want to make sure that we shine a light on them. I'm going to throw to you, Ned. What soft skills are valued most as an ecologist or conservationist, and how can you stand out from other applicants? So what your biggest piece of advice is for starting in the sector, and yeah, and Andy, if you want to add to that afterwards, that'd be fab.
I think the connection piece is huge. Like everyone's really talked about it in their presentations. It really is just like it's going in with an open mind. It's, not expecting that you need to or should know everything. It's being able to just talk to people and listen. And yeah, I think that'd be it. It's listening and just, opening up those conversations. Like the connections are really what makes this job worthwhile. It's what gives you that foot up. I think I saw a question somewhere in there of, is it a good idea to make a phone call when you're applying for a job? And I would 100% back that. If you can meet someone in person, the recruiter in person, or if you can make a phone call, establishing that personal connection, you that makes you stand out. You're not just a name on paper. You're a voice and you're a face, and people get a lot from body language and tone and stuff like that. So it's really working on that communication piece is huge.
Thanks, Ned. And for you, Andy, and to back onto that question is your biggest piece of advice that you wish you knew earlier, and that's just come through. So we'll tap that one onto the back of this question, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just reiterate what everyone has said. Basically, I guess my take on it as well is because I've come from that slightly different angle, and definitely an organisation like what I've seen at Bush Heritage is that they're definitely more willing to look at person who's the right fit for the team rather than the smartest person in the room. People can upskill and develop more skills and learn from other people in their role. So definitely, and to find out if you're the right fit, it's about talking to people. It's about opening up. Like Ned said, making that phone call to the recruiter and just asking about the role and just making yourself known. That does leave that little thought bubble in someone's head that they remember who you are. I know that's really nerve-wracking. I've been in that exact same position. I've questioned whether I should or I shouldn't, and I'm always so glad that I do. Sorry, I've forgotten the second part of your question, Tiani.
You've pretty well answered it, really. What you wish you knew when you were in undergrad or as a young person?
I guess maybe not what I wish I knew. My only advice would be there is so many more opportunities out there than maybe what you realise. I know when I graduated, a lot of people really struggled to land a role in conservation or wildlife. And a lot of people really kind of gave up really quickly. But I was lucky enough to get a position pretty close out of uni. But what I would suggest is just keep at it, because the opportunities do present themselves, and there is a lot of opportunities out there. And I know I'm in a privileged position where a lot of people can afford to go volunteer and spend their time rather than work and support themselves on a paid gig. That is 100% a known entity in this industry. But you don't have to work for free to put yourself out there. It's attending a meeting at a university with a lecturer. When a PhD student is presenting their thesis in a lecture theatre, go along. That's just an extra hour to listen to somebody's research, and then you can go and chat to them afterwards. Small things like that do really open up doors, and you can create those connections that way.
Awesome. Very, very well said. Well, I got a lot out of today hearing the wisdom of Andy, Izzy, and Ned, and I hope that everybody joining us did as well. I think takeaway from this, all the bits that you need and leave the bits that you don't. I think if we can all get into this sector and be thriving and enjoy it, I think it's a good show that anybody can get into this sector and thrive and enjoy themselves. It's a really special place to be able to contribute to caring for country and to have the privilege of getting an income for caring for country as well. So definitely encourage you all to continue asking questions. Feel free to reach out. I know that we didn't get time to answer every single detail, but you're welcome to send emails to Megan. I want to say a huge thank you to Chrissy and our Seeding the Future team. A huge thank you to Andy, Izzy, and Ned. Izzy had to jump off a little bit early today. She's actually running into another work shift, so massive thank you to her for organising that. Huge thanks to Steve, who's our tech wizard. Thanks, Steve, you rock. And Megan, who's our organising queen, who does a lot of our engagement for us. Thanks, Megan. You're absolutely fabulous. We'll be sharing the recording link with you all shortly, along with a brief survey. We'd really appreciate you filling out the survey so that it can help shape the future of the sort of engagement events that we run, and also so that we can be open to feedback. You can let us know how everything went. But that was 3 awesome presentations, and I hope the Q&A was really meaningful too. Go check out some scats, some poo, look at some flowers and work out the difference between what's a weed and what's native. And I hope you enjoy your weekend. I hope you get out in nature and have the opportunity to look up at some stars really soon. We thank you so much for your time. Kaima Esso with love and thanks, and we'll see you next time.